Hello, and welcome back to Red Alert Alternative Director's Cut with me, Dr. J. We're going to start off this episode by bringing up the mission that we're about to be playing in the mission editor. This is the Soviet mission Control the Media. The premise of this mission is that you have very limited forces, but there are forgotten villages scattered around the map, and you have a broadcast truck, which you can use to broadcast Nod propaganda. And so you need to move this truck to the various forgotten villages to help you destroy a series of EDI mini bases until you get what you need to take out the main EDI base in the northeastern corner of the map. When Ortega played this mission, he found a couple of bugs. And so we're going to take a look at just a little bit of mission design by seeing how we can try to fix those bugs that he found. One of the bugs is that Forgotten could spawn out of destroyed buildings, which is not intended at all. And the technical reason for this is because for this mission, I don't think I did this for every mission. I think that I usually realized I wasn't supposed to do this, but I must have just forgotten when I made this mission or something. No pun intended. And so the problem is essentially that there are 9 different civilian units in Red Alert called C1 through C9. Or was it 10? C1 through C10? I honestly don't remember. It's either 9 or 10. And C1 is actually used for the technicians. So when technicians spawn out of buildings or destroyed harvesters, they are unit type, unit ID C1. And I had also used unit type C1 to represent the basic mutant, which is the reason that technicians then also had the mutant stats. So this is theoretically a relatively easy fix. I just changed them to be unit type C3 instead of C1. C3 does not spawn out of buildings or harvesters, so in theory, this should mean that we have fixed that problem. And then I just had to update a few team types that had been configured to spawn 5 units of type Civilian 1. I changed them to spawn Civilian 3, which now has the stats for the basic mutant. So theoretically, that'll fix that one bug that Ortega found. And then the other bug that Ortega found was when you attack one of the EDI mini bases, they begin spawning infantry out of their barracks. And they spawn fairly rapidly because the idea is you're not really supposed to attack the EDI mini bases with your own forces. And so because their barracks start quickly spawning guys and just cranking them out, the casualties that you would take trying to take one of the EDI mini bases by yourself are pretty prohibitive. And so that's what attempts to force you to use the Forgotten to do your dirty work instead. The problem is, I had forgotten to ever turn off that spawn. So they will just spawn units infinitely until Red Alert hits some kind of limit and refuses to spawn anything more, or maybe just straight up crashes. I think Ortega lost the mission before we found out which of those two things would happen. So basically what we need to do is we just need to turn off those spawns after a certain amount of time. Because once you've spawned enough teams of enemy infantry, you've pretty much done your job of making the bases prohibitive for the player to attack with his own limited resources. So the way we do that is we have to create some new triggers. Now, the way that the spawns occur is when these EDI bases are attacked, it turns on what in Red Alert scripting is called a global. And globals are just values to which you assign a number, and you can turn them on or off. So for example, you could say turn global 1 on, or turn global 3 off. And all globals begin off by default. And you can check the values of globals to cause certain events to happen. And so what happens is when one of the 3 EDI mini bases is attacked, it turns on globals. One of the EDI mini bases turns on global 2, you can see the event here is attacked by anybody, that it is attached to 2 buildings and 1 unit. Those are the buildings in the unit guarding that mini base. And that the action is global set 2, which means turn on global 2. And then there's another one of these global 4 for another one of the EDI mini bases, and then global 6 for the third EDI mini base. And then we have some team types called RSP, which stands for response, 1, 2, and 3. And these team types spawn at a particular waypoint, and they spawn 5 rifle infantry each, and then they move to another waypoint, and then they activate hunt mode, which basically means that they just continuously search for and attack enemy targets until they're destroyed or until all enemies are destroyed. So those are the team types that get spawned in response to the bases being attacked. And the triggers that spawn those team types have the same name as the team types themselves, RSP1, 2, and 3. And the way that these triggers work, the first one says when 2 time units have elapsed, and each time unit is 6 seconds in game time. So, or is it? Yeah, it's 6 seconds. And so that's every 12 seconds. And when global 2 is set, then reinforce using team response 1, which means spawn team 1, essentially. So this won't activate until global 2 is turned on, because that's one of the conditions. And once global 2 is turned on, that condition is met. And then, when 2 time units have elapsed, it spawns this team. And the trigger type is set to have constant existence, which means it doesn't turn off when it activates. It will just keep activating over and over again every time its conditions are met. And thus, every 2 time units, once global 2 is set, we spawn that reinforcement. The problem is this never got turned off. So they would just spawn infinitely unless the barracks is destroyed. That turns it off. But if the player attacks the base and doesn't destroy the barracks, then these spawns will just occur infinitely, which will eventually crash the game or cause something else bad to happen. Like the game will then refuse to create any new units. So what I decided to do is to just turn these spawners off after they have spawned 5 times. Because I've decided that is sufficient that it would be probably ineffective or cause too many casualties for the player to try to take these bases without the help of the Forgotten. Once each base has spawned 5 groups, that's probably enough. And so there is a new trigger that I just added to turn off the spawns after a certain amount of time. And in Westwood's missions, whenever they had a trigger that would destroy another trigger, they typically use the letter X for destroy, basically, and then the name of the trigger that gets destroyed by this trigger. And so this trigger says, when global 2 is set, after 11 time units have passed, destroy the corresponding spawn trigger. So since these spawns occur every 2 time units, they will have occurred a total of 5 times before this trigger gets activated and destroys the spawn. So this should eliminate that bug that Ortega found. Now, I haven't actually tested this yet. So for this episode of the Director's Cut, we're going to do a live playtest and see if the bugs have been fixed by these changes that I've made to the missions. All right, so let's dive in and do some playtesting. So I'll go ahead and load up Soviet 13. I will immediately restart because that's what causes the changes to take effect. And now let's see if the bugs have been fixed. So first thing I'm going to do is attack one of the EDI mini bases to start triggering the spawns and see if they turn off after spawning 5 groups of units, which is what they're supposed to do now. And it'll be interesting to see how much damage that does to me. And if I'm still able to complete the mission after doing that. If not, no problem, we'll just restart. This is a playtesting session, after all. So rather than taking the broadcasting truck to this village and having the Forgotten destroy the EDI mini-base for me, we're going to foolishly attack the base ourselves and trigger the spawns. Okay, so that should do it, because I have attacked one of the guard towers. Alright, there's the first spawn group. And now, if they stop spawning after creating 5 total groups, we'll know that bug was fixed, at least for this base. That's 3, I believe. 4. Should be 1 more. 5, and now there should be no further spawns. Looks like there's not. The spawns have been turned off, so it looks like the fix worked. Now, am I going to be able to repel the resulting attack on my base? I should be able to, I think, because the infantry are spreading out and not attacking me all at once. It is extremely annoying that that guy's going for the SAM site, though. Yep, die, please, thank you. I want to lure them into range of my... they're all going to attack the SAM site. That's irritating. I want to lure them into range of the camel pillboxes. Now they're bunching up enough that they could be problematic, but they're behaving very foolishly, so it looks like we're going to be able to repel this attack no problem. Okay, so that spawn was completely different. That wasn't a retaliation spawn. You can tell because it has a rocket soldier in it and not just rifle infantry. That is a timed spawn to attack my base as opposed to counterattacking when I attack them. So it's fine that that spawn occurred. Now, I'm going to go trigger the Forgotten in this village. Get them to destroy the base for me. I may regret losing that SAM site. I don't remember if there's a drop in this mission, but there might be. It's amazing how much I don't remember about my own missions, but when you make 37 of them, and then make lots of changes to them over and over again, you start to forget some of the details. I find that rifle infantry are actually pretty effective at fighting the Visceroids, which is the main threat that I'm going to worry about coming from the north. There's also a number of EDI attacks that come from the east, and I'm going to need to deal with those as well. Oh boy. Luckily for me, that Humvee is just ignoring the broadcast truck. Oh, there's the Visceroids. The Visceroids, by the way, are just repurposed giant ants from the secret Counter-Strike missions. Which is why they have the giant ant death animation. Okay, I'm not even going to bother capturing this war factory, actually. It's not necessary to win the mission. You can, if you have some strategy that involves vehicles, but you don't have to. And that way I'm going to be able to crank out a bunch of infantry. Now, how about if I attack another EDI base to cause another spawn? Let's have some fun with this. And see if we can foolishly attack every single base on our own and still win the mission. Because that would be kind of fun. To intentionally play very suboptimally and see what happens. Just send in a couple guys. I want them to get off and attack. Okay, if they attack that, it should trigger the spawns. Alright, run. I don't want to lose the whole squad. Yep. Now, even though the spawn point is on the barracks, amusingly, the game is having them come out of the guard tower, which looks really goofy and weird. If the guard tower was destroyed, they would spawn from the barracks properly, but for whatever reason, the game has decided that it wants to have them spawn from that building instead. I'm not sure exactly what criteria the game uses to determine what building to spawn out of. It's clearly not just whatever building the spawn point exists in, otherwise they should be coming out of the barracks. I'm going to see if this is totally unguarded. I think it is. If it's not, I'm going to lose the supply truck and lose the mission. Alright, looks like that spawn also turned off as it was supposed to, so that's good. These guys might attack a different EDI base, which means I'm not going to test whether the spawn turns off on the other one, because they're probably going to destroy the barracks before it reaches its theoretical spawn limit. But that's okay. I turned off the spawns the exact same way for each base, so I'm pretty confident that if it worked in one, it'll work in all of them. So, another point of interest, I replaced the Soviet voices with actual Russian voices, but I don't speak any Russian, so I used machine translation to figure out what they should say, and then just used a Russian voice generator to actually generate the voiceovers. And I kind of expected that some of it would probably be wrong, because machine translation is very imperfect. And sure enough, a Russian viewer alerted me to the fact that some of the voice lines didn't make any sense. So I made some changes. There is still one voice line in there that I guess shouldn't be, which is that one of the responses the Russian troops will give is Roger, like literally the word Roger. Because I put that word into the machine translator and it just gave it back to me literally. And I thought maybe that meant maybe Roger is a loan word. Because, you know, there's a lot of languages that use English loan words. It didn't occur to me that it actually thought that I meant the name Roger. And so it turns out that no, Russians don't say Roger, so that's actually incorrect. The reason I haven't fixed that yet is because my Russian voice generator stopped cooperating and isn't allowing me to save the voices it generates now. So when I find a replacement or otherwise fix the voice generator, I will get rid of that voice line. But for the time being, apologies to any Russian players and viewers, but you'll have to put up with it. It's really cool living in the age of the internet and being able to share your work with people on the opposite side of the world and get their feedback. Now, it's completely unnecessary to win the mission, but there is an island up here which has a whole bunch of supply trucks guarded by a Tesla coil. If you can figure out a way to destroy or bypass the Tesla coil, there's a whole lot of money to be had on that island. And you have to blow up some short turrets to get an LST as well. It used to be that this mission was more complicated, and that that island contained an iron curtain that you needed to capture in order to bypass some Tesla coils here. But I decided that was a little too complicated, so I simplified the mission a bit, so that now when you take out the third EDI mini-base, there is a helipad there that you can capture, which will allow you to destroy the Tesla coils. It's a little more straightforward. I try to strike a balance between making the puzzles tricky enough to be interesting, but not so tricky that most players would get stuck and not be able to figure out how to solve them. This is going to be a bit of a problematic attack. Very problematic attack, actually. And I'm out of funds for repairing. I suffered pretty bad losses fighting off that attack. Oh, and it's not fought off yet. So this is very bad. I really don't want to lose my engineer, especially. Okay, that was an unmitigated disaster. Oh, that was a disaster too. That squad is gonna die to those to that EDI attack. So playing the mission intentionally poorly is coming back to bite us. I don't know if we're going to be able to complete it. Where did I put my broadcast truck anyway? There it is. Okay, I thought there was an airdrop, so selling the SAM site is going to mean that we don't have a SAM site to shoot that down. Obviously, rocket soldiers would be able to as well, but the rocket soldiers are all dead. And now I'm losing my base to Visceroids, so I think the base is lost. And I didn't have enough forces to defeat the Visceroids guarding this Forgotten Village over here, so my only hope is to get the supply truck to bypass them without getting destroyed, which I doubt is going to happen. I think it's going to die en route and we're going to lose the mission. Go, go, go. Yep.
Your mission is a failure.
We failed. But I'm actually not going to bother replaying the mission and completing it. That was just a playtest to see if the spawns turned off, which they did. And nothing appeared to break by changing the standard mutants from C1 to C3. And that will also cause technicians to no longer have mutant stats. So it looks like all the bug fixes worked. So that's a successful playtest. And we're actually going to call that a video. We're going to end on a note of failure that time. See you next time, everybody.